Hey Racer fans, thanks for joining us. Our weekly look back at great drivers, tracks, teams, cars, the things that made us fall in love with auto racing. Today we're going to talk about a guy that ran Formula One, IndyCars, Trans Am, Can-Am, NASCAR, the World Endurance Championship, the SCCA, and IMSA. Think about that. I don't think anybody's ever done that. His name was George Follmer. And you probably have to be my age, 60s, maybe 70s, maybe late 50s to remember George. His career ended in the late 70s. But this guy was one of the most versatile and underappreciated racers of all time. And he's got a late start in his career. I think he was in his early 30s when he started. In 1965, he was the USS, I think it's RC, the United States Racing Champion, like Roger Penske had the same title. And then he branched out, and in 1969 he bought an IndyCar. It was called a Cheetah. And he put a stock box Chevy in it, and he's a rookie in USAC, and he goes to Phoenix with no oval track experience and wins the Phoenix race in his own car. It was unbelievable. Howard Gilbert built the car, and a stock box Chevy, a stock box I don't think had won an IndyCar race before. So he takes it to Indy, makes the Indy 500 as an owner driver, qualifies for Indy 3 straight years. But what really takes off, what really kickstarts his career is in 1970 he becomes teammates in Trans Am with Parnelli Jones. And Trans Am is really starting to capture the American public's attention. So Parnelli wins a championship with great support from Follmer. They win the Manufacturers Championship for Bud Moore's team. And in 1972, George is the top dog in Trans Am. But in 1972, the Can-Am series has taken off. Roger Penske's got Mark Donohue and then Porsche 917, and they're the team to beat. Well, Donohue gets hurt. So Penske turns to George Follmer to replace Donohue. Follmer wins the first time out. Penske's so impressed with how George drives that he decides when Donohue comes back he's going to keep two cars. Follmer ends up winning 5 races in the Can-Am Championship in 1972 to go with his Trans Am Championship of 72, the only driver to ever win both those titles in the same season. It's so impressive in 1973 that George Follmer finds himself in Formula One. That's right. The UOP Shadow team, Don Nichols' team, hires George Follmer, 39 years old, to be their driver. He's a rookie in Formula One. His very first race is at South Africa. He finishes 6th. They only pay points through the top 6. He gets a points-paying finish his very first time, ends up with a podium at Spain later on in the season, finishing 3rd. No one's ever been older in the history of Formula One and started their career, and no one's ever had any more success at that age than George Follmer did. So, what happens in 1974? Still hanging in there with Formula One, but when he's not Formula One racing, he goes NASCAR racing. Wins a pole, gets 3 top 5s, jumping around the world to drive race cars, and he's still keeping his hands in road racing because that's his forte. So he wins a Formula 5000 race earlier that season. So what happens in 1976? Well, let's go back to 75. He wins an IROC race in 1975 to add to his resume. 1976, he wins a Trans Am Championship again, becomes a 2-time Trans Am winner. So, when you look at this body of work, from his first IndyCar victory in '69 to his second Trans Am Championship in '76, and think about all the different cars he drove and all the victories he had. He also won Formula 5000 races. He teamed with Peter Gregg and won Sebring. All you need to know is that Parnelli Jones said once, he's one of the most underappreciated drivers I've ever driven against and one of the best. He's a hell of a racer, and he was kind of this American treasure that nobody really knew about. And there's just a wonderful book written by Tom Madigan called The American Wheelman. Follmer, The American Wheelman. That's just such a great way to explain what his career was. He was the American Wheelman. So, a salute to George Follmer. Hell of a career. Go check out that book. There's some good videos on YouTube about it. Don't forget this week, Marshall Pruitt's going to be filing videos and stories all week from the Rolex 24 in Daytona. We appreciate you watching RACER.com and reading RACER.com. This is Robin Miller. George Follmer, what a badass.